with just a little encouragement or admonition. So rather than try and wing it, I'll just read to you guys what it is that I wrote. And this is also for the people that watch online. So, good morning and Shabbat Shalom. So, before we start, I wanted to reinforce a concept for you about what Torah study is. First of all, this is a condemnation-free zone, so hear no accusation or judgment from me. Torah study is a classroom and a teaching, not a sermon. It benefits both you and the teacher if you have read the portion and taken some time, up to you as to how much, to consider the portion and maybe write down some questions or observations to share or discuss. Know that each teacher has the authority to lead the study as they see fit. So sometimes there is little discussion and other times there is a lot. So be prepared for either and enjoy. Okay, so again, this is not, I'm not to say that anybody's not doing this right or whatever, but I think you guys have been coming for a while. You've experienced various instructors, and some people like to lecture more, some people like more group discussion, those types of things. But in either case, it benefits the whole group and yourself if you guys are taking the time to read the portions before. And even, like I said, write some things down or keep something in your head about, if I get an opportunity, I'd like to have this question answered or have some conversation about this. Especially for me, because I really, believe it or not, I don't like to hear myself talk all that much. I would rather hear you guys talk. So, which is kind of like why I choose to ask more questions than lecture. But that's just me. So, with that being said, Torah study for this week was Numbers chapter 4 verses 21 through chapter 7 verses 89. And I have an exercise that I want us to do, but I think first what I wanted to do was just give a little bit of a highlight or things that stood out to me in this portion, and then we're going to just sort of macro look at it real quick, and then we're going to zoom into some things and do some group brainstorming. So these are some bullet points about the things that I noticed from the chapters. So, and they're not in a sequential order as to how I noticed them. This was just sort of as they popped to me. So things that are discussed here or that jumped out to me, one were authority structure that is going on in the chapter, right? Being God to Moses and Aaron, and then the family heads, and Levitical family, them being numbered. The fact that God said to pick men from between the ages of 30 and 50, I feel like there's some significance to that. But again, I'm not going to zoom in on that. That was one bullet point. The next one was that each tribe made the same identical offerings of gold, silver, and animal sacrifices, and that they all participated. In other words, every tribe had skin in the game when it came to this.
Animal skin.
Literally. But as to say, we're talking gold and silver and not in puny amounts either. Like these were, the weight in shekels for them was actually significant. The next thing that kind of popped to me were lepers and unclean due to discharge or coming in contact with a corpse were put outside of the camp to keep it clean as God's presence was there. And something in that I kind of wondered, has anybody seen Ben-Hur? The Ten Commandments. Been a while, right? But I have them on DVD, by the way.
We did the Ben-Hur one backwards. It was phenomenal. The redone one was.
Oh yeah, I know that. Actually, my wife likes that one better. I'm old school, but so yeah, I had remembered a teaching that Tom did about how women after childbirth or in need were very well cared for by the community, and it wasn't like. And just reading it, if you don't really dig deeper into it, it could seem like, wow, a woman gives birth and she's got all this stuff, and now she's unclean and can't be around everybody and so on and so forth. And he did an awesome job at explaining how the community would actually go above and beyond to make sure that she was cared for and that was fellowship and she wasn't just left alone with this new baby. And anyway, so I kind of was wondering if, how lepers were treated, how the people that were unclean because of not just like a temporary bodily discharge or something, but maybe they had an ongoing medical thing and hadn't received any healing for it, or so on and so forth. Like based on the movies, were lepers and unclean people treated well from what you remember from the movies? Not so much, right? Unclean, people throwing rocks at them, begging for food, and that may or may not have been the case. Obviously, I wasn't there. So, but anyway, it was just something that I sort of pondered for a little bit, and I just wanted to bring that up. The next bullet point was the assignment of duties regarding the tabernacle service and the breakdown, transportation, and the setup of the tabernacle, which has always really been kind of logistically fascinating to me too, how all that kind of stuff went on. Next bullet point was confession and restitution for sins of unfaithfulness against the Lord. What is this? We're going to get into some of that. Nazirite laws was the next bullet point. And breach of covenant, where we're talking about adultery, was dealt with in the chapter, or somewhat. And yeah, so anyway, hey guys. Good morning. Shabbat shalom. All right, now we have to start all over again. Anyway, so those were like kind of the highlights, or what I picked was the bullet points of the things that really jumped out. There's a lot in these chapters, actually. But what I wanted to do was start off with an exercise, and then we'll sort of zoom in. So let me give you guys a little bit of explanation for this. All right. So these sins of breaking faith with God, right? They were I think, I'll preface it with this. The concept is that when a person hurts another person, they're actually breaking faith with the Lord. Okay, so this, love your neighbor as you love yourself, right? Included in all the most important of commandments is, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. And when we do harm to our neighbor, intentionally or unintentionally, this deals with unintentionally, but we're going to get into some of the nuance for that. You're breaking faith with the Lord when we do that, right? So with that in mind, sins that were committed in the form of interpersonal sins, in other words, so in ways that you wronged another person. How does one unintentionally do harm against their neighbor? And this is what I wanted to brainstorm about it. I'm not setting anybody up for failure or anything, but so think about this, right? Sins that would include or breach of trust with the Lord or breaking faith with the Lord in the form of hurting your neighbor would include, first of all, property crimes. What are property crimes? Fraud, theft, cheating another person. Think about that in a modern context, and try and think about it in the context of ancient Israel as well. How does one unintentionally commit fraud, theft, or cheat another person? Right? Why am I emphasizing unintentionally? Can anybody have anything they can say about that? Why do I keep saying unintentionally do these things?
So like the penalty is different for certain things, like intentional sin. There's no remedy, but Yom Kippur is the only remedy.
Bingo.
Right. So If it's unintentional, you asked a really good question. I'm trying to think of an unintentional.
Well, you guys are gonna spend a little bit of time writing some of that stuff down this morning, right? So what he said is right. Yeshua being the ultimate sacrifice made it possible for the intentional and the unintentional to be dealt with. Okay, but ancient Israel, to the best of my understanding, did not have a way of dealing with the intentional sins other than the penalties that went along with it, which is usually being kicked out of the community or some other form of disassociation or discommunication, various other things leading all the way up to the death penalty, depending on how grievous the crime was, right? So, I don't know if you guys want to make a little note on the top of the paper or whatever there, but this is the question, and this is what I want you guys to take a few minutes to, as a group, brainstorm. Excuse me. Cheerios. Okay. I'll read it again. So these crimes or offenses against another member of the community could include, or we'll start with property crimes, right? Fraud, theft,
Do we
or
need to write this down?
if you want to.
I mean, is this the question?
Well, the question is, how do any of these things actually, how could they come about unintentionally?
How did this come about unintentionally?
Right? How does one unintentionally commit fraud, unintentionally commit theft, or unintentionally cheat another person? Okay? I'm not saying it's impossible. Excuse me. The next category of sin towards your neighbor that is also a breach of faith with God would be deception. Deception would be wronging a neighbor and hiding the offense, right? All of these required full restitution, full confession, and repayment of the full principal or value plus 20%. So that's just sort of the how one can offer recompense for the unintentional sin of wronging your neighbor in any of the ways that I just demonstrated or that I just spoke to you about. Okay? So I'm going to give you guys like 5 to 10 minutes. I want you guys as a group, if you want to join one of the other tables so that you can do this with everybody. You sure? Okay. Yeah, and write down some ways that you think that it's possible to unintentionally do fraud, theft, deception. What else did I say? Yeah, cheating another person. So unjust weights, scales. Hey, you have a farm stand, and you sell, barley by the whatever the given weight might be, and your scales are off, or you've messed with them so that it actually goes in favor of you. Kind of hard to figure out a way that could be unintentional, right?
Right.
But, okay, so starting now, 10 minutes as a group, discuss it and write down some ways that this is possible. And if you can't come up with any, that's fine too, but try.
Can you give us the verses, Paul, that you're?
I'm sorry, Faith?
Can you give us the verses you're zooming in on for your question?
So, here, I'll read it as I wrote it, if I can read it. Okay, so these were sins that were committed in the form of interpersonal wrongdoing. And you said you wanted to know the section?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's chapter 5, and I would say start at verse 5. Yeah. If you, depending on what Bible you have, it may have a heading over it. Sometimes they'll do that. This New King James has confession and restitution as sort of the subtitle for chapter 5, starting at verse 5. And then it goes into concerning unfaithful wives, and then chapter 6 starts on the laws for a Nazirite. So it's really chapter 5. Yeah, starting with verse 5. Mikey, good morning.
Because I used to.
Okay, now we have to start all over again. Shabbat shalom, Mikey.
So we're brainstorming how you can unintentionally sin against your neighbor. And so, first thing.
everybody, you guys feel like you finished up? You need another minute? Good? Okay, who's gonna be the brave soul that's gonna be the spokesperson for each table and step up and share what you got? Okay, go for it, Jim.
Okay, these are David's ideas, basically. Great ideas.
So he takes all the blame for,
Well, they're great.
Sure.
okay.
It's great, like you're doing you're burning, your vegetation on your property,
Okay,
and it gets away from you and it spreads to your neighbors and burns their house down or something like that. So,
okay.
but, central Kansas, that's very much a.
Yeah, I almost did that in Wyoming, believe it or not. For real. Different story,
There
different
could be
time.
places that say, you're not even allowed to burn, and then you're burning, and all
Okay.
kinds of negative things, result.
Mhm.
Okay, so it'd be, that's sort of an unintentional tort, a wrong against your neighbor, okay?
His boys got in a fight and they broke the window of their house. So
Okay.
generically, you could say people are fighting and they cause damage to others that they didn't intend to. There's the fight.
Yeah.
Mention the kielbasa. The kielbasa. He got angry. He threw a kielbasa at his brother, and his brother ducked, and it went through the window. So we got home from a date.
Okay.
Broken window, great. Kielbasa. You gotta be kidding me.
Right, could have been an undercooked matzo ball too. Right. Why not? Okay,
Another one, you have animals on your property. and
Okay.
They escape and cause damage.
Because someone was told, hey, shut this gate, this is what may happen, and then someone that legitimately has a right to be there, but they forgot the gate open, and let's say it's cattle, and there were, a large number of cattle that escaped and were gone or lost, and so serious damages. It was unintentional.
okay. So they ate Mrs. Goldstein's petunias, is what you're saying? Okay.
They like to get in the cornfield and the bean field. And you hope it's your bean field and not somebody else's.
Sure.
And sometimes if it is, you just gotta make a restitute. What do I gotta do to make this right?
Right. Well, we'll talk briefly about that too when this is done, but, okay, was
And
that
there's
it?
the whole category of manslaughter. We
Okay,
understand manslaughter is defined as unintentionally murdering. And one example of that, I guess, would be like traffic crashes. Sometimes you can be speeding or doing,
sure,
run a red light, whatever, on your cell phone, and you have a car crash,
Right.
and you hurt or killed someone else, and death is involved, manslaughter.
right. That borderlines the unintentional, the crossing into negligence.
Yes.
There's some,
Right,
that's a legal fight right there, but,
yeah.
okay,
This is a funny one. You're playing golf with a golf ball.
Okay,
Leaves
golf
the-
hadn't been
leaves the
invented in
area.
ancient Israel that I'm aware of, maybe in Ireland but,
Okay, so this is supposed to be restricted to ancient Israel.
no, I'm just busting
Okay,
your chops.
okay. And then I used to do mortgage surveys, which, you take out a mortgage on a property, it's supposed to verify that nothing is encroaching on easements or setbacks or neighbor's property or something like that. So I guess if you don't go through that, you don't, and you unintentionally build something in an easement or on your neighbor's property or something like that, could happen.
Okay,
I thought
see
it
me
would be
after
another
service, I
Torah
have a question
commandment.
in regards to that for you, actually.
I thought a term
No.
of commandment, you should not move your neighbor's boundary marker.
Okay,
It's a very practical Torah commandment,
right,
but I guess if you don't bother to find out where the marker is at, then you can unintentionally do something with that.
okay. Was that it for you guys?
Yeah, it's enough.
Okay, yeah, all right. Who wants to go next, which table?
We
Okay.
came up with two. We did a lot of talking about the two, so we just
Okay,
came up with two.
great.
But one was, if your animal that you own well, I don't know if you accidentally did it, but if they hurt someone else and cause harm to someone else, your animal, you're responsible for it, but you didn't actually do it, so that's unintentional. If your animal were to hurt someone else, like for example, a dog.
You didn't intend for
Your
your
ox.
animal to
Yeah.
do that for
A
somebody
dog
else.
or a
Unless you
dog.
know that your animal is suspect,
And it's different.
then it's different.
Yeah, like pit bull.
Torah actually deals specifically what it is that you're
With the
talking about,
house.
minus the pit bull. I don't know that there were pit bulls in it.
A mean bull.
The boring,
With an
Yeah.
ox.
Bull, but mean.
different kind of bull.
Just like I used to be in the cattle business, so I had a lot of what they were talking about over there.
Hmm.
And sometimes I had bulls that would just get upset and get bored, so they'd tear up the fence and go to the neighbor. I always hoped the neighbor had a pasture too, because if he didn't, he got into crops, and then I'd have to make restitution on the crops.
Sure.
I would tear them up somewhat until I got them corralled. So that was a never-ending battle, and it just was, but that was part of it. But I didn't intend I had a good fence for the bull, but they want to go somewhere else. And even if there's a pasture next to it, you know, if he's got some cattle that are in, females that are in heat, and he doesn't have any work over here, he goes find the work. He'll go right through anything except for a
Right.
brick wall, pretty much. If they're, because, you know, they weigh about 1,500, 1,600 pounds. And so, yeah, you know, I've been chased by him several
Yeah,
times.
I was thinking of that when you was talking about.
Yeah, one time
A
when I was,
couple times you got chased.
Yeah.
I was just barely, I felt like a rodeo clown sometimes. Wow.
Been there, had a ranch in Wyoming, and all my neighbors were cattle ranchers, and I've had them freak out of their yard and decide to come into mine. And then I'm chasing them around on a four-wheeler, and then they're chasing me around while I'm on the four-wheeler. Big animals could do some serious damage.
Oh, I'd take some of my Holstein bulls when they were over with, and they weighed 2,000 pounds.
Yeah.
And I'd have to get them loaded with in a uniloader because they were mean. And I couldn't get out there. I'd just take the uniloader and guide them.
Right.
After they hit that a few times, I said, look, I think I'm gonna win. I better go that direction.
You think he's fast running.
At that time. Thank you.
Okay, so our second one that we came up with was, if you're selling something and to you it's a fair price, but someone else that bought it may walk away and think it wasn't a fair price. So like bartering or, you know, any item you might sell or be renting or something like that. You know, sometimes you just have to come up with the price and you may think it's fair, but somebody else may not. Which was the other one.
Okay.
Well, you had a good example, Faith, about when you had your place in Christian Union.
Well,
Rentals.
I mean, cool.
You're welcome to share it if you want to.
I don't know if it was completely on target. No, we were, Terry was sharing about a business he was in, and I shared, I owned a home that I rented rooms to Christian women for a period of time. Had no idea what to charge. In this one particular room, everybody that came in named the same price. I said, what do you think? You know, what could you afford? And it was always, so I just, between me and the Lord, that was the price that the room was gonna be. So my intention was not to overcharge or charge less, and that's how it was reconciled.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Whippersnapper table. What do we got?
We were looking at a little bit more of a broader picture.
Okay.
So we were trying to figure out the main reason that could cause you to unintentionally harm in any of these specific scenarios. And so we kind of boiled it down to a lot of these cases would be because of ignorance, either not being familiar with the law or like with boundary lines, just ignorance of where the boundary begins and ends, or even ignorance on how your behavior could be interpreted by another.
Okay.
So that's kind of what we came up with.
Okay. So, very good. Let me go after one in particular, fraud. Okay. How does someone unintentionally defraud someone?
I mean, we were saying that one could be ignorance of the law and what would be considered fraud, different situations.
Okay. So, without going to Google or getting into the direct definition of fraud, right? It's basically you're misleading somebody into believing that they're getting a service or a particular item for a set amount, and they're not. Or you're representing yourself as someone else to avoid actually paying for something yourself, right? So in modern times, that would be like stealing a checkbook from somebody, or you know, and then going ahead and forging their signature on it and bringing that check to some place and to purchase something, right? There you've committed fraud.
How can that be unintentional?
That's why I'm asking these questions,
It's like,
or asking this question.
yeah.
It's sort of hard. Is it possible? Yeah, it's very possible for these things to be unintentional. You kind of got to do a little bit of, I guess, mental gymnastics to sort of put that together. But what you guys are saying, right, like boundary lines, it's just interesting because a lot of these things also require some sort of due diligence on our parts, right? So you bought a piece of property from somebody, again, I'm doing the ancient context, you know, in ancient Israel, right? So this is your actual family, right? This isn't just your neighbor, not saying that, I'm not trying to diminish that, but this is like ancient Israel, this is your blood, right? So you don't do your due diligence, right? And you buy, you know, a piece of land from your neighbor, and there's all this family inheritance and all the other stuff that has nothing to do with this chapter, but it's all in here, right? So this has ramifications. So you don't do your due diligence, and everybody's like, oh, you know, it's fine, I trust you, you know, here's what you're paying, and so on and so forth. And then you come to find out years later that you actually didn't give them what it was that they were properly due, right? So then we get into sort of this restitution part for any of these things, whether it was you accidentally took something from somebody else, right? So how could theft be unintentional, right? Well, I don't know, I'm walking down the road and I see some valuables sitting on the side of the road. They fell out of somebody's saddle, or they fell off of something, right? And you find it, and you're like, hey, finders, keepers, losers, weepers, right? Because that's in Torah. No, it's not. Right? There's no finders, keepers, losers, weepers. You're obligated to try and find who it belongs to and or return it, right? So, you know, you're feeling lazy, or you find something and you're like, oh, I'll do this, but I'm really busy right now. I'll get around to it later, and you throw it in your saddlebag, or, you know, on your donkey or whatever it is, right? And you go on with, and then you forget about it. Okay, and then some time goes by, and then, you know, a couple of months later, couple of years later, whatever it is, you're emptying all the stale hay or oats out of the bag, and boom, falls out. Okay, you unintentionally stole from somebody. So now the restitution for it, right? So here's the required restitution: full confession and repayment in full of the principal or the value of the item. Okay, so what does that look like? I guess if you were talking about a boundary or a piece of land, right, like the full value of it, first of all, going and actually confessing, right? So, and this isn't just confessing to the person, but this is confessing to priesthood and to the Lord that you have wronged your brother, right? Making full restitution, or the full value of what it was that was taken or defrauded or broken, or whatever the case may be, however you harmed or committed a tort against your neighbor, plus 20%, and an animal sacrifice to go along with it, which also wasn't cheap, right? So all of this, it hurt. And clearly it was designed to hurt, right? Like, okay, you should feel something from this. Not just in your pocketbook. Pocketbook is definitely getting hurt here. But also the fact that you have to humble yourself and go before the priest and or possibly the person as well, and the Lord, and confess what it is that you did in front of God and everybody, okay, and then make it right. I think things would be a lot better today, honestly, if we still had a system that was like that. I really do. Coming from prior law enforcement, and it's my strong opinion that you would see a lot less repeat stuff if it cost people, like it did back then. But okay, was there anything anybody else wanted to bring up in regards to this, Miss Emma?
I have a comment.
Shoot.
So I was thinking about what happens. So I agree with we had the setup of, we're talking about unintentional sin. How can these be things unintentional? How can these be unintentional? And we have some good examples of how that's possible. Mm-hmm. And the argument that it's like, there's not really like a sacrifice for intentional sin. But what about this? And I'm kind of creating.
Awesome, here we go. Hold on to your seats, guys.
This is not earth shattering. But it's like, I wonder if it's possible that this situation, as far as confession of sin, restitution, atonement, sacrifices, these things, apply to a situation where, say, you have someone who's in a bad spot. Not saying that being in poor circumstances is an excuse to commit crime, but they're hungry, they have nothing, they steal food. Again, not saying that makes it okay, mm-hmm. But it happens, they do it, they, eat whatever, next day, a week, whatever, period of time, some unknown period of time passes, and they feel a conviction of, I should not have done that. If they go and confess their sin, go through this restitution process, make the sacrifices and stuff, does that fit within this, even though initially they knew what they were doing was wrong, right? So I'm kind of creating this, like, if you respond to the conviction of, like, the like personal guilt, conviction of sin in your own conscience, does it then fall sort of in the category of unintentional sin, even though it doesn't? That's not the best label for it. But do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh yeah. No,
it's like you do something that you know is wrong, but you have the conviction and you in good faith try to make it right. Mm-hmm. Where does that put you?
What do you think?
I mean, I'm thinking that I think about circumstances, and it's kind of like, if you really know, you wouldn't do something, but it's kind of like you have this cloud over your decision making, right? That you're not really thinking clearly because of you're hurt, you're hungry, or whatever it is, the circumstances. And then when you get to a place where your head is more clear, then it's obvious, what is right, what is wrong, that I did something wrong. So I thought about this a lot. I haven't come to any conclusions. Just how accountable, well, yeah, there's just a lot involved in it. When you're not clear. I mean, there's the whole thing of, like, someone found is that for a reason of insanity, right?
Okay.
Things. I don't know that that's in Torah.
I mean, I guess you could be maybe so hungry that you're going insane from being hungry, but
yeah.
kind of being a little bit facetious there. But
yeah.
I wanted to give other people a chance to go ahead and do this. I have an answer for you.
Great.
Yeah, Ms. Faith.
Sorry. Well, Paul makes the argument that before he knew Yeshua, the things that he wanted to do, he wasn't doing, and the things that he didn't want to do, he was doing. So he was in that dilemma, as it is all of mankind. And even keeping the law is not righteousness before the Lord. So then he concludes with, who will set me free from this dilemma, this law of sin and death that's operating within my flesh. And the conclusion is the Lord himself, so the indwelling Holy Spirit. So, but then there's warnings, he who intentionally sins after that fact, that's a frightening thing.
Right.
They think we can always confess and trust in His mercy, that He sets you free from that loss.
Well, clearly, Yeshua was a much better, perfect high priest and perfect sacrifice covers all of it, in my opinion, all the way back from the beginning, all the way to the end. All right, so I'll ask this question. Was there provision under the law and in Israel in regards to the problem that Emma brought up in the first place?
Yeah, that was the thought that I had about, the Torah deals with many different types of laws. Part of that is providing adequate sustenance to the needy, those that didn't own property, those that they lost a spouse, let's say husband, and so very difficult to fend for yourself, and so they had a pretty systematized, I don't know what you would call it, welfare system, way of taking care of those that really needed help. So should someone really be in a place of really even being that hungry, if people are doing what they should be doing, I don't have an answer for that, but just it's a thought.
Right.
Well, I think we could have a similar conversation too about because back to the point of humans make irrational decisions when there are certain circumstances.
Absolutely.
Whether it's when you feel you're in danger, somebody you love is in danger, your needs aren't all all these things. So it could even be you feel like your child or your wife is threatened and you fight someone and they you don't intend you're just intending them to stop harming and you permanently disable or kill them or something. So it's a category of things of or maybe you do. Maybe you feel so threatened that then you take someone. I don't know. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
I don't know if I'm making full sense, but it's but there's these categories of so I think that, to the point of but I also, again, I'm not saying that just because you're in a hard situation makes it okay to commit crimes and to sin.
Right.
But I do think, my personal opinion, and I'll stop interrupting, I promise.
Oh, you're fine.
But my personal opinion is that there is some value to the if you sin, and maybe you're sinning, but the conviction of it then causes you to come back to to confess, to make restitution, to add the 20%, to make the atonement sacrifices, to do what is instructed to deal with sin. Can you be restored back into right order? And I would suggest that you can be. I think that there's also this issue of then what's your trajectory after that? Because of course if the same person is doing the same thing over and over again, and even if they're going through the process, it's there's still something there hasn't been a shift, right?
Right.
So I think that the behavior afterward also is important.
Sure.
But I don't know. For me, I feel like it's feeling the conviction of sin and doing the right thing is meaningful, I think, to the Lord. So
Do you guys agree?
Yeah, because the poor, it has to be a restitution through God and the Holy Spirit, because they don't have the physical means restitution to do it. So when they can steal food to survive, right, or poor and needy, that's their forgiveness. They know it because they can't make any other restitution.
Right. Well, so here's where my brain wants to go with this. Is the God of Israel in Numbers the same as the God of Israel in Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John? Universal. For those on TV, universally, everybody's nodding their heads yes. Right? So,
Yes.
yeah. So, I don't know why we have this propensity, or if it's just something that's been willed into us again by teaching, the media, TV, movies, I don't know, where we're the God of ancient Israel, the God of the Old Testament is mean and unbending or doesn't understand and is just in heaven waiting for you to do something wrong so he can go. And he's not. This is Adonai, gracious and compassionate, loving, right? So the in my opinion, the system of justice and the ways things are made right, or so on and so forth, there is kindness in them. I think in modern times, our society has come up with every way to give excuses to the perpetrator and forget the victim. You know, oh, well, they only did it because they had a bad upbringing, or their dad wasn't nice to them, or they were poor, or they were rich, or they were white, or they were black, or there was, you know, whatever the thing is, right? So we want to be generous and kind towards the offender, but what is being done to the one who is offended? What recourse do they have, right? So again, coming from where I came from, as far as work, this was the thing that used to really bother me a lot. Like, okay, we'll do everything that we can to help the person who's committing the crimes, thinking that that's going to make them stop doing it, when straight up sometimes there's just evil people, okay? Or who are just so used to getting what they want by taking from others and having no remorse in regards to doing it. And that's sort of like where Emma was going with that, you know, the person who just keeps doing it, and even if they're making restitution each time, did they really learn their lesson? Did they really get it? You know, but the heart of our God has always been to show mercy to both sides where he can. Justice and mercy, the pillars of his throne, right? It's both. Justice for the victim, mercy for the victim where it needs it, even mercy for the offender. In the case where she brought up was an excellent example. They're starving. Okay, they need food. Interestingly enough, where I was going with that, or at least my answer to that, was the Lord made provision in the law, right? About not gleaning your crops to the, don't gather, leave the edges of the field for the poor, for the sojourner, for the hungry, right? Tzedakah, or giving charity, right? And the fact of the matter is that this is ancient Israel, and we were supposed to be viewing each other as family. If my brother, and I have two of them still alive, was hungry or in need of something, and I didn't do what I could to help, it's wrong. It's just wrong. So, the Lord was very gracious in all of that, right? Again, don't pick every last grape on your grapevine. Don't glean every last blade of oat or wheat or whatever in your field. Leave something for those who don't have. And be generous. And when your neighbor or your brother asks you for something, give without expecting it back, right? Yeshua gave the perfect explanation of the heart of all of these things, right? When he discussed all of that, right? Somebody needs to borrow money, lend, and don't expect it back, right? Just have it. Anyway, okay, so any other thoughts in regards to this? How are we for time?
We're going to finish up in a couple minutes.
Okay.
As I guess, what was that? It's a saying in ancient times in that part of the world where if a stranger were to be traveling and they were to lay hold of the rope that's holding up your tent, that you had a civil duty, communal responsibility to provide hospitality to that person. I think that's, we live in such a different world than that is, but even visiting Israel, for those that have been there, they're incredibly hospitable.
Mm-hmm.
And like the Muslim people, incredibly hospitable.
Yeah.
And it's just part of how they were raised. They just give and give and give and provide food and more food, and just like, wow, it's amazing. And it's refreshing. It's a beautiful thing.
It's such a thing. When I was there, I fell in love with them. And it's a struggle for me to being on this side and seeing what's going on with the extremists and all of that. But we don't want me to go down this road. So, yes.
I just had a thought to kind of like what he was saying. I remember the stories back in the day when our grandparents, they didn't lock their doors. They lived in the country, they'd just leave the doors unlocked, leave them open. and they told me, they used to call them hobos at the time, but they were homeless people.
Mhm.
And they said they'd travel along the train areas and that they'd come to their back porch or back door and they would feed them. They'd just make them a meal and they'd feed the, they call them hobos.
Yeah.
They'd feed the hobos and give them a meal. Sounds funny now, but, and that's just what they do to help feed the poor people. But nowadays, we can't do that because we have to lock our doors. You gotta watch out because somebody will come in and rob you or, you know. So I think nowadays, it's more organized where you have to go down to City Union Mission and maybe feed homeless there or something like that.
Yeah, modern society has done an excellent job at taking the burden for these things or the privilege of these things away from the individual and away from the church and institutionalizing it and saying it's the government's responsibility to handle all this stuff. And when you really want things to get done right, stick the government on him. That was sarcasm.
Yeah. Or
Right.
the church in ours.
Well, I mean, the church did an excellent job back in the day of taking care of the, a lot of these ills for society that were just, again, as we, 50s, the 60s and 70s, in my opinion, were probably the biggest culprit of what happened, where the church was sort of pushed out of that, and it was still, I mean, legally able to do stuff, at least kind of. Getting permits and so on and so forth, and there have been a number of instances where churches or people were trying to do stuff in a park to help the homeless or to help the needy and have literally been run off by the police because they were ordered to from the mayor and so on and so forth. We don't want that going on. We want them to go to the designated government supported shelter or Salvation Army or whatever it is. But anyway, okay, well, there was a bunch more stuff, and as usual, I got done with like a tenth of what it was that I wanted to do, but, yeah, it was a great discussion. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Shabbat Shalom.